My name is Michael Asbill. I started participating in the Habitat Project with Simon about 10 years ago. And I'll sort of like explore that when the time comes. But also with me here today is Beth Humphrey, and I'm introducing her next because she and I are the ones kind of holding the ArtPort Habitat Project, and I'll also talk more about what it means to holding the project for now, with Simon Draper's blessing, who is the founder of Habitat, and Jessica Poser, who started working with Simon on the Habitat Project about maybe just a little bit before I did. This is part of Habitat's core team from the past 10 or so years. And we want to sort of like share some of Habitat's history with you today. So again, thank you for joining us. We're thrilled to have you here. We want to keep it relatively informal and conversational today. We're not super eager to just like talk at you for 2 hours. We'll talk amongst ourselves and in that kind of like informal. Feel free to kind of like break in or raise a hand and let us know if you have a question or if you want to interject. We're really quite open, so please sort of join us. It's kind of the spirit of Habitat to start with. Maybe I will just take a second and kind of give you a sense of what Habitat is. And I'd love for input from Simon and from Jessica on this as well, and Beth too, just so you have a tiny understanding, if you're not familiar with us, what we're doing. So Habitat is this fabulous project, which I would say is deeply rooted in community engagement. I would call it something of a humble project in some ways, where we build these 6x6 micro studios in public space. And we ask people to come in, kind of leave the sanctuary, the sort of like safe space of their studio, and come out into a high stakes kind of like public environment and do art with the public. We see it as a participatory work, a social engagement practice. So we try to encourage this. We try to bring you in. We try to provide you with materials if we can, and excite you to get in there and interface and activate your community. And so what we would love to do today is give you a sense of how that's operated in past years, and continue to explore the philosophy of Habitat a bit, as I've already said. So let me think about how we want to go from here. Simon, I'm wondering if you would introduce yourself, and then maybe Jessica, you could introduce yourself, and Beth, you could introduce yourself. Simon, say hi.
Hi, everybody. Well, it's funny, I've been thinking about this for a little while when Michael asked me to be part of this. And, you get into this wild kind of remembering some things and forgetting a lot. And I think, part of that is COVID time. My joke is I don't remember very much pre-February 2020. But I've been kind of making some notes, and I was thinking back how it actually started, and it was this idea that as people were moving out of the city, Beacon was kind of a recipient of a lot of artists, and there became an issue in which there wasn't enough space, and so we looked to see what that alternate space might be. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. As real estate prices went up and all of that, yeah. Right?
And also there was a big speculative market in terms of locking down space and then it not really becoming available to artists to use. And then if they could use it, it had severe restrictions on people not being able to assemble in a way. It's like it got into some very weird politics. And then on top of that, Deere was slighted to come into the old Nabisco factory, and that was down on the river. And so there was that other activity going on, which was on this other scale. And I started thinking about what, you know, going back to English roots was, you know, what's the most kind of accessible space? And I was thinking about, you know, the number of sheds in my previous history, and my father and friends of father, who all had these different passions, be it, you know, flower, you know, growing chrysanthemums to, you know, fixing bikes and stuff. And then I started to think about, well, what if that translates into, you know, the idea of the studio, and that being something that, you know, is accessible and doesn't require permitting, doesn't require all this other things. Like you can, you know, you have the time and space, and kind of getting on with it. One of the first habitats that was built was down in Abingdon with Amy Lipton back in 2017. She asked me to be part of a show called Habitat, and that's where I kind of I asked her, can I co-opt the name? And she said, go ahead. And so I created, you know, this idea of habitat for artists. And the thing about it is, for me, the habitat is the larger environment in which creativity exists, and how we do and don't create that environment for creativity, or for people to actually, you know, work and show work in different formats. The other thing, and I'm kind of bobbing about here, is that I was really aware that coming into a small community like Beacon, there was all this talk about art and artists, and everyone was like, well, what does this mean for, you know, regular person in this town? What's its effect? And that's when I started to think, well, how can we make it accessible? And that's led to the project at Spire Studio, on the parking lot, of setting up 8 small studios and deliberately keeping them way under the municipal 8x10 non-permit temporary shed idea. And that's where I invited 10 artists to participate initially.
I think we may have some photos of that too, Simon. So maybe what I will do is I'll actually share my screen so people can see some of these things you're talking about. And then is it cool? Maybe what I'll do is I'll sort of just like pivot over and ask Jessica to sort of talk to us about how she got involved in Habitat. And Jessica, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you're coming through from. I'll share my screen.
Right, yeah, I was just gonna say I'm pretty sure we have a couple of photos of those first habitats in Beacon right there when he was talking about the 8. So just briefly, hi everyone, I'm Jessica. I think I started getting involved in around, like 10 years ago. But I feel like I heard about it from you, Michael. So
oh, that seems possible.
And I want to kind of let Simon continue the origin story, but I will just say that it kind of came to me at this like pretty amazing time when I needed to rethink my orientation towards being a studio artist. So it was just kind of like a really sort of wonderful confluence for me, and an introduction to a really new way of thinking about working, and what it means to be a kind of community engaged person, artist, maker. And so I just feel really like honored that I was able to work with the project for so long and in so many different kind of permutations. But I'm gonna throw it back to you, Simon.
I mean, I'm having this like little flashback here because as I said, there's one coming up here, which is down in New York, where we partnered with Solar One, and they're a solar advocacy group, and they're trying to get solar panels on predominantly Long Island City single-story dwellings. So rather than kicking into generators, they're kicking into into solar power when so avoiding brownouts. There's also this picture of one of the habitats on the back of the pickup truck, and that's, to me, was kind of important in terms of the mobility and the ability to have this structure that could be set up ideally with 2 people, but 1 person can do it in a push, and to have it very modestly set. And as you can see, there's like, I think there's like 21 parts that it breaks down into, and the whole thing, I always stress that the whole thing's screwed together as opposed to banged together with pneumatic nails, so that if anything breaks, we can always fix it. And it's very direct in that way. And also things are attached to it. So the actual shed itself is a substruct, which here at Huguenot, you can see that we've kind of played with reclaimed windows and other things to kind of fit within its environment, but being with a historical museum there. One's at the farm. This is in the early days where we were just kind of building it out of whatever we could find. So there's these different permutations. The thing about it is that when we joke, that in a certain sense, it's not what you do in it. It's more what happens on it and in and around it, and it becomes almost this beacon or icon for people to kind of be drawn to. And here we have Todd Sargood, who was involved early on with 15 painters, students from SUNY New Paltz. And this was really interesting because having the students actually work together and come up with an organizing principle for all these painted tiles they're done in class. And the idea of them all, getting along to organize it rather than them being, so in a certain sense, this idea of a painted tapestry and what's the word? Being part of the choir rather than being the mainstay, the alto or the soprano. So for getting them to, organize together was really important. And I think that's also something that we, as artists, tend to get drawn into the genius me scenario, which I think is kind of over. I don't know. I mean, it still has a place, but I think it's. I'm not going to say anyway. Michael, I'm dithering.
Well, I think it's fantastic, and it's really great to kind of hear the origin story. And the one other thing I would just add into the equation that you've told me a number of times, Simon, is that this was all sort of like, sorry, there's dogs in the background barking. My apologies. I don't know what's going on. But the bottom line is that this was sort of like drawn from your work building crates, right? So crates for actually sort of art handling. So in a weird way, you've kind of taken that container for that precious cargo from that world of kind of like high art, and then sort of like refocused it for kind of like a community project. Which is such a spectacular and beautiful, maybe transmutation. Would that be a good word for that? So I think I think everybody can see what's beautiful about it is that it has this 6 foot by 6 foot footprint, and as Simon said, it means we don't have to worry about things like building permits and stuff so much. It's very transportable. It all fits on Simon's truck, not so well on my van.
I'd just like to point that, if I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Sorry.
There's this wonderful note that you talk about public engagement, and you have to let the public speak. And this says, get this piece of crap out of here. Who needs us? In such a peaceful setting. This was at Poets Walk near Red Hook, and it was in one of the scenic Hudson parks. And I'd asked for people's response to and I can't remember the specific question, but it elicited many responses, not always positive. So it's. As an artist, I think when you ask for people's comments, you've got to expect the negative and the positive. So, which is good, because I prefer a response rather than no response. Anyway, that's an aside. And the next picture is this. We came up with this: how much, how little the space to create. Having spent a large part of being, an emerging artist in New York City, there was always this idea of time and space. Either you had the time, but you didn't have the space. You couldn't afford, the workspace. So this idea of how much time or how little time, or how much space, how little space, and the actual space is sometimes your own ability to get to that motivation rather than the physical. I mean, you can work at a small desk and still create work. Or you can go out into the public and do something other than that. So I always like this was kind of Todd and a couple of other people that worked on the project. We kind of came up for T-shirt. So anyway, so if Jessica wants to jump in, we had a long-standing arrangement with Margie Minard at the library in Kingston. So it's kind of nice coming back to Kingston with ArtPort, because I'm reminded also that one of the first sheds I did was down at Kings Point Park, which overlooked the Hudson, which is at the end of Roundout. And I really got into the history down there in terms of talking about, some of the aspects of it being the old public park. And there used to be an area where the train came in Victorian times and offloaded to a big Empire Hotel. So how places change, and talking about that context and kind of eliciting people's, memories also, because they'd built that bridge right through the middle of that Roundout area. So over to you, Jessica.
I think this was 2011. I think. I think this was the first project I was involved in. You build the habitat, and then there were like a series of artists who did these kind of short-term, what did you call them, Michael? Micro residencies?
Yes.
And the whole issue of sort of, how much, how little, it was so interesting to me, because when I first got involved, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do in like 6x6 space? And there's no electricity. So it's also, kind of thinking, okay, like I have to be unplugged. And that was like this whole other thing. But after spending like maybe a couple of days in the shed, it just kind of opened up a whole new way of thinking about working. And of course, because it was right outside the library, there were just like a lot of people around, a lot of kids who would kind of come up and ask me what I was working on. So it was actually this habitat that ended up generating like an 8-year partnership with the library that resulted in like not only like continued residencies every summer, but an entire program for kids came out of it called Art Lab Kingston. Is that right? Kingston Art Lab.
Kingston Art Lab.
Yeah, Kingston Art Lab sort of came out of this. So I think it's just a really, and this is a picture of us actually the following summer building another habitat with the kids. And I think that's Aiden in the middle.
That's Aiden, yeah.
God.
He's the man, by the way.
I know. Okay, we're old. But I just think it's really emblematic of the program to be this kind of seed, or Simon and I talked a lot about the idea of the rhizome, this thing that kind of just proliferates and grows, takes root in the community, and then there are these kind of offshoots that come out of it. And this was just really exciting because a lot of these kids had, never had the experience of building things before. And there were like a lot of girls in the program who, had never had the opportunity to do kind of like basic carpentry. And it was really exciting, the programming that came out of this. And I think, Michael, you also did a residency there the following summer where you turned the habitat like into a gallery. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and it was the same shed year after year. And basically the residue from the previous year would sort of like build up, and it became kind of a patina of its use. And that was the case with all of the sheds that were in use, site to site. But here it was particularly meaningful because, you know, one summer's use kind of like bled into the next,
right.
which was just absolutely stunning. That might have been part of what my group did there. I
Yes,
can't,
it was.
I can't,
Yeah.
can't recall exactly. But you know, I really appreciate what you guys are sort of like bringing to the equation here. And I think what this also leads us to is some projects that happen further afield. And a lot of this, again, is just kind of like building the history of habitat so that we can talk to you a little bit also about where we're landing today, Beth and I, with the ArtPort project, and kind of talk to you about the framework that we're thinking about for it. But this was actually a project where we were invited to participate by Amy Lipton, who was chosen as a curator for the 5x5 public art project for the DC Commission on the Arts. And we actually ended up at this kind of remarkable site in Anacostia in Washington, DC, called the THEARC, which was a community center where all of these different organizations, or different institutions, I should say, from Washington, DC, including the Corcoran and so on, they all kind of came together at this one sort of like community center, which was very brand new and very shiny. And here is our fantastic 6x6 ramshackle shed, you know, ready to be activated. And I think this was a pretty spectacular and sort of like special project for us. So I don't want to sort of like hold the spotlight on that, but I'll just go through the slides so you can see how it's evolving. This was actually a part of a group of kids that I was working with. They weren't really engaging with the habitat, but I remembered what I liked to do when I was a kid. I really liked digging holes. I don't know why. So I thought, well, maybe they'd like to dig holes. And my God, they like to dig holes. So we spent all of our time down in the community garden, which is really fantastic. As Simon was saying before, it's really what happens around the shed, you know, and this was exactly a case of that. And then of course, it made some sense to sort of like bring some component of the garden right up to the habitat, right up to the shed itself. And so my project for this time was to actually build a greenhouse under the shed. And this was in spring, so we started some seedlings there in the space. And there's a few slides that show that, and the folks who were there kind of participating with us and getting really enthusiastic about the potential of growing things out and transplanting them into their sort of garden, and you know, how that kind of like spiraled out into the larger community. Wow, there's a lot of slides from that here. Very, very, very exciting work. And this kind of brings us back a little bit to Jessica's project there in Washington, DC.
Simon, was there anything that you wanted to add before I go into the mending wall?
No, no, continue.
All right. So I think this was after Michael's project. I'm not sure, can't remember. But I started a project called the Mending Wall. In my original, when I had started in Kingston, I had started doing a lot of sewing work, and it kind of came out into, it just sort of proliferated out into, you know, working with the folks who were around. And so the Mending Wall was this idea of like talking about things that people felt like in their lives or in the world that needed to be mended, and then they would just like piece by piece be added to the wall. So these were folks who were, I think, visiting the ARC and then just started, you know, hanging around and sewing and making things, and it would just kind of like accumulate over time. But I think that a lot of what came out of this was this idea of like passing on certain skill, like skill sharing, and passing on certain things, and sharing, creating situations where people could share expertise and knowledge, kind of like a sewing circle. And so kids who were in programming at the ARC would just kind of come and hang out and make things, and then it would just kind of be added to what was going on. So I feel like it was similar in the sense of the kind of growing metaphor that Michael had started, and just sort of working off of that.
Yeah, and I would also add here that our approach was largely rooted in this idea that it wasn't ours. It was, you know, really kind of belonged to the community, and we just kind of held it, you know, and provided raw materials where we could. You know, there was, at least in terms of the project I was working on, there was already a robust kind of like gardening initiative kind of like happening in the space. And this just seemed like, oh, well, maybe this is a way we can contribute to that initiative in some way. So it was about kind of like looking around and seeing what was possible. And it turned out to be quite a beautiful experience, and actually led to a second season at the Corcoran Museum, where we were actually on the National Mall, which was a much different experience. But I don't think that that's, oh, well, that's related. But, you know, one other thing I would add here is that with that project down in Anacostia at the ARC, all of the seeds and stuff were donated by the seed company, Hudson Valley Seed Library. And we did this with the idea that maybe what we could do is design a pack that was a product of the collaboration with the community in DC. And so we ended up doing an exhibition of Hudson Valley Seed Company art packs in the Corcoran Gallery that was at the ARC, and actually releasing this pack, actually showcasing it, which was a painting that was actually done as a project at the ARC of this wonderful man, Keith, who was kind of the caretaker of the ARC, and just brought all this kind of like amazing energy to those folks who sort of gathered at the ARC. We built this particular pack based on, you know, the community's choice to do basil, and launched it at that site, which was just incredible. And there you are again, Jessica.
I think that I just wanted to kind of highlight, though, the collective nature of this. And when you were talking about that it wasn't ours, I mean, I think that's part of the model that I think is so interesting for people who may be like not accustomed to working this way, but sort of shifting the notion of ownership or authorship when it comes to creating work, so that it was never really about like, you know, Simon's project or Michael's project. It was really sort of like, let's put this thing here and just see what happens. And like you said, provide materials and let it get activated. And that's why it's not transportable in the sense of like, it's the same thing, it just gets moved around. Like it's so different everywhere that it grows, depending on the way in which it's interacted with, or the way in which people respond to it. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that.
Yep, I think that's absolutely right.
I mean, it's been interesting over time to see what on paper seems like a good idea or a good place for something to happen, and then where it gets stymied or locked up in, or you know, so you know, so, and the part and what becomes very important is the partnership with the host entity, be it an institution, an individual, the library, and you know, kind of working in that context. But we've had some real surprises over the years where you go in thinking, oh, this is perfect, and it doesn't take root. or it seems, you know, hindered. I'm actually thinking about the growing analogy, as I've spent a lot of the past year, you know, struggling to find, you know, the perfect location for certain plants on the California coast, which has a marine layer, and certain plants just don't do well, although they have the heat. So it's kind of a metaphor for the project as well. That, you know, you think, oh, it should fly, and it, you know, it gets blight. So, Michael, would you like to kind of?
Yeah. So I just was going to introduce this project really quickly, and one of the things that I realized we should also bring up at this juncture is that many of the projects, especially the high-profile projects that we were doing, like this one, like the one in DC, they were all a result of our relationship, really Simon's relationship with Amy Lipton, who's just like the phenomenal curator of EcoArtspace, co-director of EcoArtspace, just an amazing human being, contributed so much to the sort of like eco-arts movement over the past many years. She just passed away this last year, and I think we want to dedicate this year to her and the ArtPort HFA. So anyway, this is a project that was associated with Idea Cities, right?
Brookfield.
Yeah, at Arts Brookfield, kind of World Trade Center Plaza. And what happened here was 2 shipping containers were brought in. Again, Amy was the curator for this. And we took one of these, you know, shipping containers and converted it into this ramshackle, phenomenal, extended, over the top, you know, Habitat for Artists space. One of our biggest ever, kind of sheathed it in all this recycled material and plant matter. And it was stunning in part because of this kind of Battery Park City background, which was all stone and glass and polished and shiny. And, you know, here we had this kind of life raft of sorts, like right in the middle of it, of creativity and color and vibrancy. And I think we were all quite proud to be involved in this project. And one of the great things about it in this particular case was this sort of like intense flow of people moving through that plaza, and the number of them that would stop and kind of participate in the projects. It was really kind of a surprise. There's a way in which we thought maybe the environment wouldn't be entirely conducive to the level of engagement we saw. But I think actually what we saw instead was an incredible hunger for it. Do you feel like I'm characterizing that the right way?
Yeah, I mean, well, it was, you know, you're outside many commercial spaces, offices, and people, we put a bright blue tarp over the thing, and people said we could see this bright blue tarp from our offices. So they would come down during their lunch break and, you know, say, well, what's going on? What's this all about? And we'd have different kind of stations in and around it, from the green wall to the greenhouse to the mending wall to an artist who would be on the other side doing something. And then I think we ran a few weeks. So the main thing for me was to have people come through on a very kind of consistent basis in which there was somebody different, so that, you know, people who were regularly working here, like, oh, you're a different art, you know, like would engage in a different way the next week or the next day. And then we had families on the weekend, and, you know, here, Michael, the seed bombs from.
Yeah, we were playing in mud and stuff in this crazy sort of urban plaza, and growing seedlings, and, you know, putting them in people's. One of the things that Simon and I recognized was that everybody comes through that plaza carrying a Piper cup full of coffee. It's like almost everyone. I don't know what I guess it's just our culture now. You know, you go out on a break, you get out of work, whatever it is, you have a cup of coffee in your hand, and most of them would pass by with cups that had already been drained. So we thought, well, we'll just put seedlings in those cups. And so it became kind of this contraband that found its way back into the office buildings. Everybody was a little nervous about kind of taking it back inside.
We also had a solar panel that people could actually charge their phones. So there was this other interaction of, you know, come in, charge your phone, hang out for a few minutes, and you know, share the experience on your phone. So, and it's kind of the antithesis, because, you know, as Jessica said, you know, it's kind of unplugged, but on the other hand, it can be plugged in a different way. And so talking of alternates, whether you're collecting sun for power or water, we actually had a rain catchment here. So simple ways that people could, you know, even though they're in the, you know, urban concrete jungle, and I think this is part, you know, we're trying to say, if you have a windowsill, you can grow some stuff, and you can, you know, be a part of, you know, the cycle of seasons, and a kind of reconnection. In a very physical way, rather than sharing something on Instagram.
Yes.
Anyway.
I think there's also just like a spirit of inclusivity in this project from the very beginning, which is really about like, you don't have to apply, you don't have to, your art doesn't have to look a certain, like, there's no entry fee at all. And I think that ended up being quite kind of, I don't know, like really courageous in this way, in terms of sort of like everyone is absolutely welcome to participate in this, and it doesn't have to be like a thing, right? It could be like a moment, you know, a really brief moment, or it could be like, I'm gonna sit down and hang out with you guys all afternoon.
I think, you know, having, you know, been thinking about the Zoom this week, and I'm actually, to Jessica's point, with thinking about moments and stories, and I think for myself, what I miss are those stories, and are those moments, you know, those very kind of individual moments where down in DC, a mother turns up with her 2 kids, and she's wondering what to do for the summer with the kids, and then through engaging with Jessica, she's like, oh, I remember sewing. And then it's like it triggers a mechanism whereby she's suddenly going, oh, I can do this with my kids. And there's other moments where, you know, from little ones to mama, you know, grandmothers, having these reconnections, you know, like, and kind of drawing on their own body of knowledge to kind of impart that, and also kind of validate it again. And I think we forget so much. And I think, you know, it's just these small ways in which, you know, that interaction, and, you know, reminding people that, you know, there's lots of ways to make and do and, you know, express.
Yeah. So there are just so many slides in this kind of marvelous slideshow that shows so many iterations of different projects, and kind of circling back here to the Kingston YMCA farm project, which I don't know that this one ever kind of fully resolved. So it's kind of fun that we can kind of cycle back around and start thinking about like our engagement in Kingston again. And I'd love to kind of bring Beth into the, because we went down such a memory lane kind of thing that was wonderful. I would love to kind of bring Beth into the equation here a little bit, as well, not a little bit, a lot of it as well. And I want to speak to the fact that Simon had kind of put together with Beth a series of projects in Woodstock, which I would say is kind of the most recent iteration in the Hudson Valley. And it went on for a couple of years, and is kind of the basis of the collaboration that Beth and I are sort of engaged in now. weirdly, I have a slightly different slideshow for that one, so I apologize for the strange kind of bouncing back around. I'm wondering if I could just share one of those slides. And Beth, maybe you could speak a little bit to the project at Woodstock Artists Association.
Sure. So, my involvement with HFA started as a fan of the project, and just thinking it was just one of those things that made me really happy that I lived in the Hudson Valley. And I think I'd been at a few sites. I think there was one at the Widow Jane Mines, and probably at the library in Kingston, but I just kept hearing about it. And it was such an amazing project going on. And so my role at the Woodstock Artists Association is education curator. I actually took over the job from Michael 14, 15 years ago. So Michael and I had that history. So I knew Michael was involved with HFA, and I do a lot of public programming, and I do a lot of programming with kids and families. And I felt like the Artists Association was really ripe for a experience where people can engage. And it's this idea of this like studio that kind of turns itself inside out and kind of invites people in. I thought was a really good thing for our organization at that time. Mainly one thing that, when I do school groups, I'll have, 40, 60 kids in the building, and there'll always be parents in there that grew up in Woodstock or in the area, and they would have never come into the building ever in their entire lives. So I started to think there's got to be some way that we can sort of put breadcrumbs out, and the HFA seemed like a perfect fit. So I reached out to both Michael and Simon. I think I met you. That's how I first met you, Simon, I believe.
Yep.
And, we did a little exhibition of some artwork down in the youth exhibition space. And then we planned some projects at WAAM. We did for 4 years, actually. We had about 45 artists come through. A few of them are on this call today. I didn't include everybody because there were so many great pictures. I just wanted to do a couple of highlights. But one of the most gratifying things for me was, I've been working at WAAM for a long time, and I got to meet people outside of our community and invite them into our community and learn a lot about them and their processes. So just 3 here. We had Padma Rajendran, who did an amazing project. She was actually a solo artist at WAAM. She had a solo show, and I invited her to come in and do this project about migration and people telling their migration stories. And so she did printmaking, and she did collage, and she invited people to come back over a couple of days. And it was just an amazing project. And the thing about Woodstock is you think there's tens of thousands of people coming through, but it can be very quiet. Maxine was one of our artists who's helping us today and works at ArtPort. There was a pretty slow couple of days when she was working there. It can be very slow, and it can be very packed. So you have to just be prepared for anything. So Padma's project was wonderful. And then we had another artist from Pennsylvania come in with her family, Anna Kell, and she creates spaces that are inspired by gendered sites of escape, like a she shed or a man cave. So she did this she shed project where she just spent a few days covering the whole thing, and then would have it open and lit as a place to visit her and just talk to her. And it would be open 24 hours a day. So people were coming in the middle of the night and like hanging out in front, and that was a lovely project. And it was one of those experiences where, we don't have stipends. She came and found a place to camp with her family and made like this incredible experience. And then Roberta Ziemba, who's an incredible artist and educator, who did this almost performative project where she wrapped the entire HFA in yarn. She's known to have a lot of stockpiles of materials, and she had copious amounts of yarn. And so what she did was she spent an entire day inviting the public to come wrap the entire thing in yarn, and then she made these giant pom-poms that she then took and hung outside of her classroom. But it was extremely performative because you'd see these 10 kids at a time holding some yarn, running in circles with their parents. It was like an incredible project. So those are just 3 of very many incredible projects. But what it did was it started to invite people first into engaging in making art, then engaging in our museum and our history, and kind of reframing what Woodstock, just in re-inviting people that are mainly a lot of tourists came by, kind of reminding them that this is a space where a lot of creatives live. It's not where the concert happened, and it's not, you know, all tie-dye t-shirts. It's a place for artists. And so I think it was really helpful for WAAM to do this, because it's a membership organization and it can be perceived as slightly insular. And so this, again, opened it up to the public and to a broader audience.
Yeah. And one of the things I remember being so remarkable about this project was how beautifully you guys, you know, programmed it. You know, there always seemed to be some new kind of like really fabulous, really exciting project happening next.
Yeah, it was a little different. I mean, I know Simon and we talked about this at the beginning, because WAAM, we had to go a little more structured. Just we had a submittable form that people had to fill out, just because there were some moving parts in our other programming, which was a little bit more formal than I think sometimes, you know, the HFA has functioned. But it worked well, because we had this, I mean, we had people from California, from Pennsylvania, I had somebody who was from France, you know, it was like, it opened it up to a wider view. And, you know, I don't know, Simon, I mean, you were kind of like, I would constantly email you and be like, this person's thinking about doing it. I was kind of updating you. And then I think you did Chutney that first year.
I did, yeah. Chutney was, which had actually started, and I don't think we have any slides. I worked with Catherine Green at in Connecticut, and she had a sculpture garden, and she actually ended up programming Jessica, Beth Wilson. I mean, we worked, I think she worked, and then artists in and around Guildford came in, and I think she had 20 something events during the first year that she had the habitat. And that was, again, you know, from individuals doing psychogeography like Beth Wilson, to the quilting group came in and just did these quilts in and around the shed. So it's great to see, you know, the intertwining of different ways and different approaches that aren't always perceived as fine art. And I think that's something in which, you know, and I when I first, you know, when Jessica first introduced the idea of mending wall, I was like, wow, that's, you know, it's like, it's not the material, that it's the ideas that get lost in the conveyance of the, you know, it's like, it doesn't matter what you use, it's the idea that's behind it that is the connective tissue to not only this project, but I think, you know, new ways of looking at art and connecting with people in real ways. And I think, you know, for me, the you know, when we were down in DC, as we, you know, the whole thing about connecting with food issues. And I think I'm kind of segueing into talking about ArtPort HFA East at ArtPort, and wanting, you know, I think especially now to have more relevance to you know, ideas involved in gender, social justice, food equivalency, ability to green markets, all these issues which on a local level are manageable and can be addressed. And I know that there are people and groups working, but I think giving voice to them in a very tangible way is where I'd like, you know, to kind of like bring all the leaves of prior projects together and kind of go, okay, well, what can we, you know, grow from this permaculture?
Yeah. I would agree that I think, you know, when Michael approached me about, should we try to get this going somewhere, you know, as great as it is to be involved with an institution like a museum, it's kind of great to not have, there are political ramifications for some of the things that you want to do. You know, it's definitely, I'm very interested in seeing what is the possibility next. You know, what can this evolve to? What are some of the issues that we can bring, issues and just removing barriers to participation? How can we do that right now after this pandemic, after we have so isolated? You know, how do we evolve and grow together? And I'm finding myself, I'm very curious to know what we can do next.
Yeah, and with that all said, you know, in conversation, well, Beth and I in conversation with Simon, we started thinking about like, okay, you know, what path should HFA and at ArtPort take, you know, this summer, and you know, I also want to return to that point that we see, and I'm kind of referring mostly to Beth and I, although Simon is always there with us, and now Jessica too, really as us as holders, you know, again, you know, we really want to sort of put this out there, and then it becomes the sort of like space of those kind of like working there and doing that work, and those people who are that community, you know, it's not ours ultimately. And so we started thinking about like, well, what is the model? What does the framework look like? You know, how do we want to think about this? And you know, I had recently, well, somewhat recently, been a part of a conversation that was actually prompted, that was made possible by Emily Putoff, who actually brought folks from the Good Works Institute to talk to us about a program that was happening at SUNY New Paltz, where I teach. And what they were talking to us about was a framework called Just Transition, which I just am so incredibly moved by. I find it is just such a beautiful, beautiful framework for thinking about moving toward a more just way of living in our world and living in our communities. So Beth and I started a conversation with him, what, a week ago, Beth, or was it more? Yeah, with Terry and Micah, and you know, I think it was a really spectacular and beautiful conversation, but what we were hoping they would permit us to do is sort of use that framework as just kind of a guiding principle through the current season. It is just really so remarkable what I can actually do here if I can get out of this program. I had it up on my computer. Let's see if I can gain access to it under here. Oh no. Oh, there it is. This is the sort of like basic framework that is laid out there: advancing ecological restoration, democratizing communities' wealth in the workplace, driving radical justice and social equity, relocalizing most production and consumption, retaining and restoring cultures and traditions. It's not that we want to kind of like hold, you know, this is ours. We just want to sort of like support and be there in whatever way we can to sort of like accommodate, or at least that's what we're thinking, accommodate this amazing framework as this sort of like season takes shape. We're kind of wondering if it can kind of be the buzz in the air in some way as the sort of like new season at ArtPort happens. And I will go just back quickly and return to this slide just to give you an idea. This is the sort of like shed that's in progress that we've been working on in an hour here, an hour there over this winter at ArtPort. Lori was kind enough to give us some space downstairs so that we could kind of like see this thing through its production, and it's become kind of a weird robot head kind of a design, as I believe Simon characterized it. It's got trailer parts on it. It's become really fun, but it's in its raw form. It's just a raw structure ready for action. And, you know, to boot, this one's actually on wheels, so it can even dance right now, which makes it particularly charming. And I think what I want to do is just from there, create an opportunity here for us to also answer some questions. Kind of, maybe it's a little early to open it up, but you know, I think we want to sort of like use this as an opportunity to encourage folks from the community to kind of consider coming out and playing a part. You know, we've created a form online where you can sort of submit an application to participate, to do a micro residency in the space. I'll say right up front, our funding is very low, so we're all about sort of providing materials in any way, shape, or form we can, but unfortunately we don't have any stipends, but we will be thrilled to support you in any other way that we can. We are imagining a person could spend an hour in there, a day in there, 5 days in there, more than one person at a time. And I also just want to say that this is a very open kind of call. Any kind of a creative, any kind of creative sort of intervention is really welcome. We want to consider that. Something that has also come up in recent conversation is the sort of like power of community-driven work starting to come back around and kind of define what we might see as kind of a more vanguard conversation in the arts. Like, how does it come back and inform what has been kind of like institutionally carried? That's kind of an exciting prospect for us. Kind of we want to, it's a beautiful research project too. What happens here that kind of carries us forward as artists? It's a fabulous and beautiful question. So we're eager now to sort of like invite you into the project and hope you'll make an application. Understand, we don't see this as some kind of really stringent vetting process. We really see it as like, okay, we see what you're thinking. How can we support you? What can we do for you? And, you know, we also just want to make sure that nothing comes up that might actually cause harm that we wouldn't want to see happen. So it's very, very, it's a very loose vetting process, but we are really super excited to see some creative action happen in this space, which will be outside along the ArtStream, which is a path that kind of heads down toward Kingston Point Park. There's a little arrow there pointing to a little sort of pullout. It happens to be just on the other side of the road from the sanitation project that's right there on the Rondout, which also has the potential to open up conversation. So I'm going to stop talking there for a moment. Beth, do you have anything else to add about that in terms of our call and what we're shooting to do?
I mean, I'd say one thing is, you know, a few things to keep in mind is there's no electricity at this point, that you need to be fairly self-sufficient. Like, you know, without electricity, I mean, you're very close to ArtPort. You know, you're just a few, what, I don't know, 100 feet away from ArtPort. But it can be possibly kind of busy and it can possibly be very slow. So just being adaptable and flexible in terms of, you know, if you are creating a project that requires a lot of participation from the public, just, you know, maybe getting your constituents to kind of participate, or just be prepared that there might be a few or many. And it's also quite a stunning sight. I mean, if you're right on the water there, you're just directly on the water, which is a really interesting thing to think about including or just holding. Yeah, I think that's, you know, the main thing is like self-sufficiency. I mean, of course, we're around to support you, but you most likely will be there on your own. And we'll certainly be like promoting and, you know, helping you in any way. We do have some materials too. We have quite a bit of really high quality art paper. We have easels, we have some tools. We got a gigantic donation from a studio that closed down. So there are things that we like, basic materials that we have available too.
Yeah, but I just want to sort of say, you know, you heard about some of the things that we've done in the past. I mean, Simon making chutney, that's a pretty exciting and interesting and sort of very sort of like not conventional art sort of like thing to do, you know, in a space like this. Mending, you know, propagating seedlings. There are so many ways to think about it. It was one of the reasons why we thought this would be a wonderful presentation today, because if we could get folks to get involved, we feel like there are so many ways to do it. And, you know, if there's something you've been wanting to try, something you've been wanting to kind of test out, this could be a wonderful opportunity to do that. Jessica or Simon, do you have anything else to add to that pitch?
Yeah, I'd say that anything goes, and the idea of, you know, that you're doing something. I mean, people say, well, there's a performative aspect there. It is and it isn't, but on the other hand, be prepared to, and a large part of it is engaging with the public in real time, rather than, oh, don't come in, I haven't finished. It's like, you know, and how you might change the way that you usually make to have something that's kind of, you know, it's a vehicle for another narrative. And also it's about, don't expect always that you're giving something to the community, that sometimes you're the recipient, and the experiences that happen are sometimes greater for the participant than the people coming by. And collectively, that to me is, you know, that shared moment, which may be a minute or an hour, but boy, if I think back over the, you know, the number of years that we've been doing the project, the stories are, you know, rich and wonderful and layered. And so we've done a lot of different projects in a lot of different locations, from, you know, in a field to in the inner city. So there's a wealth of experience that we're happy to share. And I think that is also, you know, the support that you get from other artists who have done this, and to kind of be there for you, just like, you know, sharing in the new project. So
we're getting a couple of questions about the time frame. So we're going to be starting projects in May, and it's going to run through September, just in terms of when the programming is going to happen. And you know, you can be doing a one-day residency, and I think we have it up to 5 days. I'm sorry, I don't have the call right in front of me. It's listed in the chat there. But yeah, so, you know, it can be seriously micro a day, and then I believe it's up to 5 days.
And you can find that, I believe Maxine provided a link there for accessing that application. But if you are interested, you can go there to apply, and you can reach out to us with questions or thoughts. But I would like to take a moment. I don't know if folks do have questions, do have comments, do have things that you want to sort of like share. I definitely want to carve out some space for that as well. You know, and you're welcome to write something in the chat. You're also welcome to just sort of like yell something out. You know, we won't stand on ceremony here, but I'd love to hear from you if you have any thoughts or things you'd like to say.
I do want to say that if you need help in developing your idea further, we're really, really happy to help with that too. You know, if you have a germ of an idea.
Yeah. And in addition to that, you know, we're also going to be encouraging students to come and participate. You know, we really feel like this is an interesting place to sort of like test out, you know, stretch your practice a little bit. And for, you know, certain younger artists, it's a wonderful opportunity to sort of dip your toe into something like community engagement, social engagement.
Yeah, this is Jessica Baker. Hi, thank you all for doing this. I'm very excited. I participated at Woodstock Artists Association and Museum. Oh my goodness. Beth, when was that? My mind is a blank.
2018? Was that 2018? No, it must have been 2019. I think you were there the last year it was there. So 2019.
Oh, yes. Yay. But you had like, we had some way to get like to an outlet, if I recall. And I'm just curious about is there even like a, you know, an outlet opportunity?
We have fantasies about a solar panel right now, but I don't want to promise anything.
We're working on it. Maybe this will inspire us to call and see if anybody solar wise will sponsor that. But yeah, right now there's no electricity.
Okay, just good to know, because then you don't go down that,
Yeah.
rabbit hole of an idea.
Although maybe somebody will show up and do a project with a bicycle that will sort of like power your project.
That would be perfect.
I actually saw that on some program, like, I don't even remember now, but somebody had a bicycle where they were doing their laundry,
Nice.
like with a like a barrel where they put the laundry. This was like in, gosh, I think it was somewhere in Southern Africa or something. They had this project where they rode the bicycle and then it did the laundry. It tumbled the clothes. Sorry, totally off subject.
No,
That's
it's like
right.
when you said that, I was like, maybe that'll be my project. I can help people do their laundry at ArtPort.
It was actually really brilliant. Like, it literally did their laundry with less water and more efficiently. And they also, I mean, not that they needed the exercise probably, but they're like, and they get exercise too. So.
We also got another question about whether or not Joseph asked, are there plans to expand this project to multiple towns outside the Hudson Valley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're always dreaming in our conversation with Tara and Micah the other day. We were kind of dreaming about how it could kind of like extend out into Kingston, of course. I have a fantasy about it on a boat. Simon even did a drawing on a boat. We were kind of dreaming about it sort of like moving up and down the tides of the Hudson. There, oh yeah, I mean, build the boat. We have kind of a chant going on. So, we're, of course, yes, Joe, yes. And by the way, Joe is a wonderful former student and somebody who we would so like to see involved in the project.
Yes,
so,
for
come
sure.
up, figure out a way for us to sort of do a project down by you, Joe. You'll be our point person for HFA Stony Brook.
We also got I think a very good point or question. Have you thought of publishing plans, building a habitat? Would love to see this idea go wild, like the little library pantry thing. I think that's a great idea. Simon, I don't know. Could you? There you go. He says yes.
And I'll say, Eliza, it's really it's so sort of like thought through. I mean, the plan is so specific and just Simon and I got to a point where I feel like we could bang the construction one out, all the sort of like cutting and stuff in just a couple of hours. It would go really quickly, and then putting one up would only take us an hour and a half or 2 hours. Although I will confess, doing the one at ArtPort took weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks because I was wrapping it together here and there. But it can go up fast, and you do it with modular pieces.
Modular. It's all about systems. Oh God, it's with the idea of industrialized efficiency, we've looked at this many ways, and people say, oh, you could use this and use that. I'm like, no, but this is what we have, and it's direct, and let's not get caught up in the tiny house. And I'm just going to say, no, this isn't a tiny studio house project. We are OCD, but we're not that way inclined in terms of, oh, how does this move in a certain way? It's like, no, just knock it together, get it out, and be direct, and stop fussing around. So yeah, in terms of it's for me, it's more what happens. And somebody did ask, what's the worst thing that can happen to a studio? And I said, nothing. And they're like, what? I said, nothing's the worst thing. That's so, do something, or do, it's like, that's,
Although sitting out in my field for 2 years has done some damage.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah. It's, it's wood, and it's painted wood, but, it's screwed together. We can take it apart, rebuild. It's all good.
So
Stefan, your hand up.
You have your hand up.
Because ArtPort Kingston, sort of as a framework, will be also support. You can come to us or something. We have a studio complex out there, which is not so far from your, I think, from your location. I'm not sure. So maybe there's a possibility to occasionally put electricity with a long wire there. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't see it exactly where it is, where you want to place it. But anyway, we have a studio complex. So I can also see that if you need to have the bathroom, if you need to go to a bathroom, maybe I can get you a key and you go to the bathroom or something, you know.
Kind of like a gas station. It could maybe
Yeah.
be a really big key
That's
fob
right.
of some sort.
Right. Just want to say, but we'll support it, right? I mean, so you'll
Thank
be
you.
not alone out there.
Thank
And,
you. Well, yeah, and you have like, I mean, just having this kind of vibrant art space with all different kinds of things happening all the time. There's just like, it's radiating energy, you know, so there's really that. And also towards the summer, you know, you're talking about people biking, like you could actually just bring your bike and go for a swim in the middle of the day at Kingston Point, you know, it's
oh,
like,
yeah. It's like
how
a
you-
highway. There's
Yeah.
lots of people walking there. It's a highway.
Yeah.
Lots of dogs as well.
well, that's a project in the
Dogs are
making.
welcome.
Dogs are welcome.
Canine applicants, in fact.
Are there any other questions? I mean, feel free to, you know, ask anything or contact us. There's lots of information on the website and reaching out to us because we're happy to, if you think about it and have other questions, we're happy to answer them later.
Absolutely.
Is there a deadline?
It'd be a rolling deadline. I think
It's a
we
rolling
didn't set
deadline,
one.
yeah. I mean, before September when it's done.
Yeah,
That
but
sounds good.
we are hoping to see some applications over the next month and a half so that we can just vet some projects and get the ball rolling. We're pretty excited to start programming the space. So, you know, there is a level of looseness that we embrace and enjoy, I will say. So I don't think there's currently a deadline set, or am I wrong, Maxine? Is there currently a deadline set? No, I didn't think so. Okay. but all of a sudden, Maxine's got a new idea. So there should be a deadline. Yes, but I would say it's rolling and friendly. Yes.
Yeah. An age requirement, because I'm just wondering if high school kids are eligible.
I've had high school students be HFA residents at WAAM, which I enjoyed a lot. So I think I would be happy to have high school students involved. I mean, Michael, I don't mean to speak for everybody, but maybe you have a different opinion, Michael.
I feel the same way. I think what it comes down to is just making sure we're comfortable that person's there is safe and stuff like that. So I think that's I would say yes, apply. And my God, if it's a 12-year-old with a really, really good idea and they're able to kind of bring a parent along,
yeah,
yes, do it.
I would love to see kid-initiated ideas, totally. And you know, I think between Michael and I and our experience working with kids, we could certainly have an idea if it's feasible. You know,
we're happy to answer more questions, but if there's no other questions, let me just sort of I'll just take a moment and say thank you to all of you for joining us. Again, I know it's part of your Saturday afternoon. We have enormous gratitude that you chose to do that. I want to thank Simon. I want to thank Jessica. And also I want to thank Jessica for the slideshow. The slideshow I put together was not nearly so fabulous. So that kind of was just miraculous. And I want to thank Beth. I want to thank Lori and Stefan for hosting us to ArtPort Kingston. We're so excited to be participating in this with you and being on this collaborative journey with you. I want to thank Maxine. Maxine is the behind the scenes guru, making so much happen here. We're so excited to be collaborating with Maxine. This is not my first rodeo with Maxine, so so thrilled to be doing that. And we hope that we're going to be collaborating with all of you this summer in some capacity. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. Like, thank you, because you really you kicked off this iteration, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Come down and visit us, even if you're not doing a project. Come and see us. Come and participate. come and make some art with us. We'd love to have you. And come, and Lori, I didn't give a chance to you to plug ArtPort. Do you want to take a second?
No, I just want to say that I am absolutely looking forward to this, and I think it's going to be some incredible projects happening. And I mean, with all this expertise of experience and projects going on, I think, and just having, you know, the Kingston waterfront, which gets activated on the weekends, I think it'll be quite dynamic project. So we're all excited at ArtPort. So send in the proposals and let's go.
Yeah.
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Thank you, everybody. We hope you have a great day. Thank you for joining us.